Good evening and welcome to our first, for this school year, our virtual town hall. I want to begin by introducing our cabinet members, and to my right, all the way over to the right end of the table is Mr. Kravatz. Could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what your position is in the district?
Sure. Good evening. Matthew Kravatz. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources.
Hi, I'm Eric Hassler. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction.
Good evening. I'm Patrick Cahill. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Management Services.
Good evening. I'm Bhargav, Assistant Superintendent for Compliance and Information Systems.
Thank you. I am going to remove my mask for most of the time because I will be reading the questions. I want to begin by just saying a very heartfelt thank you to those parents who submitted questions. We have, I believe, 44 questions. Some of the questions are duplicates, so we won't read every question, but our attempt is to answer every question that was asked of us. The goal of today is really to address what we feel that the community is wanting information on. When we took a look at the questions, they really broke into three different groups. First is COVID, quarantine, and health questions. The other question were related to what's going on in our schools, to violence, vaping, student behavior, and the third group of questions are related to curriculum and CRT in our schools. So again, I want to thank everyone for submitting those questions. We do have families that submitted questions that were specific to their specific child and their schools. I want you to know that those questions won't be read out specifically regarding your child, but they have been submitted to the building principal. And our understanding is that if they're contacting you or they have contacted you, if that doesn't happen within the next couple of days, please feel free to send me an email. With that, I am going to begin with our first question. And the first question is, what is the future plan for when students are quarantined? And this parent talks about their child and not having remote instruction. So I want to begin a little bit and talk about the purpose or how we started this year off. I think we can all agree that what we learned in the past year and a half was that remote instruction was not the best way of instructing our students. And so when this year, when we came back to school, we felt that our main focus is really to have in-person instruction. It's important. The teachers' lessons are important. And so when we started talking about how we would provide for students who were quarantined, our belief at the time, at the beginning of the year, was that we would be providing home instruction. And so we met with our teachers and we came up with a plan. It's evident that that plan isn't necessarily working and that we have students who are not receiving that instruction. So I want the community to know that we are currently working to come up with other alternatives. Dr. Hassler will speak a little bit about that. But I want to acknowledge to the community and more specifically to our students, I know that when you are quarantined and you are home, that it can bring an added layer of stress, not being able to connect with your teachers or have a better understanding of what being taught in the classroom to no fault of your own. So again, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hassler and let him respond to that question.
Sure. When we presented at the beginning of the school year our back-to-school plan, basically what Mrs. Rodriguez and I shared with the community was the home instruction model as she spoke about. Basically, the home instruction model is something that is offered to students who, when they're required to quarantine either due to exposure or being symptomatic of COVID, students at the elementary level get an hour worth of additional support, and at the secondary level, they get 2 hours worth of additional support. And the teacher would either be posting materials in Google Classroom or making materials available for the students to and families to pick up in the main office. Obviously, as COVID numbers increase and the number of quarantined students has increased recently, we're meeting with our staff to come up with additional plans to provide supports beyond just that home instructional model in order to be able to support our students.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about other things, one of the things that we are looking into is potentially hiring additional staff that we can use to support our students who are quarantined or support our staff when they are quarantined. So we are in the process of doing that as well. This is not a singular way of addressing the issue. there's going to be multiple things that we need to do in order to make sure that our students are getting instruction while they are on home instruction. The second question is, do you plan to have any remote learning if COVID numbers rise? So last year, if you remember, we went on what we called a holiday pause, and that really came directly from the Orange County Health Commissioner, Dr. Gelman. And so one of the things I did the last couple of days, probably about 2 days ago, I called Dr. Gelman to see what was the county's thought about this potential holiday pause or recommending to schools that we should go on home instruction. Her response to me was that that would not be a recommendation that they were making, that there are other mitigating strategies that they are talking about, wearing a mask, staying 3 feet or 6 feet apart from one another, not sending your child to school when they are sick, making sure that if you are concerned about COVID, that you have a COVID test. So there's multiple, including vaccinations. So they believe that there are multiple mitigating factors or strategies, as they refer to them, that would allow us not to have to go back to remote. And again, I started this by saying that we know, if we have to go remote, we are prepared. And we have Dr. Vyas here who, I'm going to ask you this question, if we had to go remote, would we be able to handle that? Meaning that, do we have enough Chromebooks? Do our teachers, does everyone have what they need if there was an emergency?
Yes, so we are prepared to go remote if needed to be, and from a technology perspective, yes, 99.6% of our students have devices, all our teachers have devices, and we are currently working to provide some of the additional devices to our teaching assistant and teachers' aid as well, so we will be ready if that is the case.
What do you mean that 99%? What does that mean?
It's only 37 students who do not have do not have a district-assigned devices. So every student in our district has a district-assigned device that can be used on-site and during our school time as well as at home.
Does that mean that some students have a device, their own device?
Some students have their own devices, which they don't use it in the school, but they just keep it at home.
Okay, so then in other words, if any student in the district needed a Chromebook, we have the ability to provide that to every student?
That is correct.
Okay, I was just a little confused by you saying that not saying 100%. So this question that was asked as well coincides with some other questions, and I'm trying to combine because this is an hour. Are there any plans to go remote, the 2 weeks? That's the same response is that at this time, the 2-week pause was something that was recommended by the commissioner. She does not anticipate us doing that. And then the other question has to do with the threshold. So what's the threshold? So with any communicable disease, it could be the flu, the county takes a look at that, and then if the county sees that the numbers are rising and they have some real concern, then they would make that recommendation. Again, I spoke with Dr. Gelman. She did not give me an inclination that they are there. But again, we always have, the pandemic has taught us that we have to be prepared for anything that comes our way. So I just wanted to share with you that if in fact we ever needed to go remote, that we are ready with our technology to make sure that we can instruct our students. I'm going to go to question number 3. The question is, the COVID positivity rate in high school went up significantly among students. What is the district doing to address this?
So I'll take that one. We're continuing to enforce mandates, the masking mandates when you're in classrooms, social distancing requirements that are all outlined by the CDC and the DOH. We continue to recommend hand washing and all the other basics that go along with, battling battling COVID.
Okay. When a child is quarantined, why is live streaming into the class not an option? Dr. Hassler?
Sure. Again, when we presented our back-to-school plan at the beginning of the year, we had spoken about why live streaming and the remote option was not something that we were offering this year, largely because the expectation is that our students were going to be in school in person. We developed a process to put in place for students who might have various medical conditions that would require some form of remote instruction, and we worked individually with those families on addressing that. The reason why live streaming and the remote instruction was an option last year was first and foremost because we were on the hybrid model, and also we were required to offer that remote option. So when a student was quarantined last year, all of the classes were already live streaming, and students had the ability to be able to log in. However, we've received a number of questions about the challenges that go along with the remote instruction and live streaming, and the impact also on in-person students. So we decided this year that we were not going to be making that option available, and we were going to be focusing on in-person instruction. However, as we said in the beginning, we are going back, again, as the COVID numbers are increasing, it becomes challenging with the current home instruction model that we're using, and we're going back and identifying what alternatives we can do to continue to support our students.
Thank you. And Mr. Kravatz will speak a little bit about contact tracing and who gets quarantined and when they get quarantined, but I think that one of the things that's striking is the number of students who are being quarantined. I think right now at the middle school, my understanding is that we have over 100 students that are being quarantined, and we have approximately 40 staff members that are reaching out to the students and providing the tutoring. So we know that it's a significant problem, and our plan is to develop a plan that we can implement come January 2022. And as we've done all this past year. So last year, we kind of looked at things and made decisions incrementally, right? As the numbers rose, we made decisions. So again, we'll take a look at all of that, and we'll be providing you more information, hopefully before we go off into our winter break. Question number 6 is, why aren't students being seated 3 feet apart in classrooms and 6 feet apart at lunch, which could avoid mandatory quarantines?
So students are beyond the 3 feet and as far as desks, and at 6 feet in the cafeteria whenever possible. And that's important because the CDC states that when it's possible to maintain a physical distance of at least 3 feet, such as when schools cannot fully reopen while maintaining these distances, it's important to layer multiple other precaution strategies. So if we want all of our students, as many as possible, to be instructed in person, the only way you can have them in is if we continue to meet those requirements as much as possible.
Thank you. Question number 7, how are you providing special education services to students who are quarantined?
So our special education students that are quarantined are entitled to home instruction as is any other student, so they will get their allotted of home instruction hours. In addition, if they receive any sort of related services, those related services will also be provided remotely to them.
Thank you. Question number 8 was answered by question number 2, which was regarding remote learning and the 2 weeks of holiday pause. Question number 9, it seems many of the social distancing protocols have been relaxed at the high school. Desks are no longer spaced, and some teachers have abandoned mask wearing. As we continue to see a spike in new COVID cases, what steps is the district taking to ensure that safety protocols are being followed?
So I can speak to that. And the desks are spaced as best as they can be, as I mentioned earlier. All staff and students, regardless of their vaccination status, should be wearing masks within the classrooms. So if they're not, we should know about it, and so we can enforce it.
Question number 10, what is deemed a close contact with COVID-positive student for the purpose of contact tracing?
So when there are a lot of busy people in this district when it comes to contact tracing. So when we have a COVID positive case, and we're either told we have a test that proves it, or the local DOH has reached out to us, there are a series of things that go into motion. Usually the school nurse or school administrators begin to ask questions, and the questioning is part of our contact tracing. And we use things such as this, where we determine who has to be quarantined. Was a student, less than 3 feet from somebody else for more than 15 minutes, or were they within 6 feet of the case for 15 minutes or over 24 hours? Vaccination status does come into play when quarantines are being determined. As of right now, if you are fully vaccinated and you have an exposure, you do not have to quarantine unless you also have symptoms. So even if you're fully vaccinated and you have symptoms, then you'd have to quarantine. So there are a number of things that go in come into play when that happens. That's all determined at the building level. So before it gets to us, we're certainly informed of it, but all that's done at the building level, typically between our nursing staff and our school administration and our teachers.
And Mr. Kravatz, there are some charts there that I think that after tonight, we're going to post so that people can actually see. We have a chart that says, if this, then you do that. He will certainly post that we'll have that posted on our website tonight at the latest tomorrow morning.
Yeah, for those in the audience who are visual learners, it's really helpful. We'll get it out there. I know, I think most of us are. But everything from student to student, contact to the lunchroom to transportation to sports, that information will be up on our website.
I think another piece of information that I should share with everyone is that we are required by law to fill out what we call a COVID data dashboard. So every day, we input the information, whether how many students tested positive, if a staff member tested positive, we break that information down into buildings, and that information is then shared at the state level. That is why every Wednesday, I believe, we send an email to the families telling you what the number of, COVID positive cases that we had, just to continue to keep you up to date. Question number 11, I believe we answered it. The question relates to, when do you think, what's the threshold to return to remote instruction? Again, I want to reiterate that is really done by the county, and they let us know if they believe that our numbers are too high, and they would make that recommendation. However, in speaking to the commissioner, she did not think that at this point she would be recommending that. Another similar question number 12, has to do with the high school going remote. And again, the same answer as I answered before. Decision to go remote is really done on the basis of a recommendation from the Commissioner of Education. Question number 13, virtual learning represented a challenging academic period for many students, with standards being significantly lowered. Can you please provide families with an update on the district's proficiency performance report, as well as any supplemental initiatives to help students who are struggling academically in core subject matters?
Sure. Similar to what we were talking about earlier, this question for me reinforces again the importance of in-person instruction, when last year certainly represented many academic challenges for our students, both in-person and remote. This past summer, we offered our Summer Crusaders program, which we traditionally offer, as well as summer school, but we introduced a new program in the form of Summer Bridges, which was opened up to students from kindergarten through 8th grade. We serviced over 1,000 students in that program. We plan on offering that program once again this summer, because the program offered not only additional academic instruction to continue students' education into the summer, and the reason why it was called Summer Bridges is to carry them from June into September. But it also provided enrichment opportunities for our students as well, which was very challenging during the pandemic. It was open to all students, and that's something that, again, we're going to be offering next year, in addition to our traditional Summer Crusaders program and summer school. We also continue to make adjustments in our curriculum based upon the impact of hybrid and remote instruction last year. Our teachers continue to differentiate instruction to meet the needs of our students, as well as continuing to provide weekly extra help after school.
Thank you. Question number 14 is for Mr. Cahill. What conditions came with the money Monroe-Woodbury accepted from the federal government for COVID relief?
So broadly speaking, the conditions associated with the COVID-19 related federal grants are linked to the use of the funds for eligible expenses, which for the most part are expenses associated with preventing the spread of COVID-19 or mitigating the impact on students and staff, with obviously one of the most serious or more serious impacts related to learning loss and learning recovery. So there are 3 separate grants when we talk about federal monies associated with COVID-19. There was the CARES Act, which was the initial grant, and that was in March of 2020. There is the CARISA grant, which stands for Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplementary Appropriations Act. That was passed in December of 2020. And finally, there's the American Rescue Plan Act, which is the largest allocation to Monroe-Woodbury of the three. Broadly, they all sort of are designed to provide funding to school districts to mitigate the impact of COVID, to cover expenses related to COVID. The CARES Act was a little different in that we had to share some of that funding with the non-public schools based on Title I formula, which has to do with the socioeconomic status of families. But, in general, what did we do with the money? So these expenses, the expenses related to COVID included the purchasing of cleaning supplies. There's tremendous amount of cleaning activity and, hygiene.
Can I just interrupt you for
of
1
course.
second? Because I know you mentioned that the first money we received, we were required to share with our non-public.
Correct.
Can you just speak a little bit about how did we do that? Right, we had to, I'm answering the question myself, is what I do, sorry.
What we had to do, it was essentially, the non-public schools had to agree to participate, number one. So we had to go through a process where we reached out to the non-public schools that would be eligible in our district and determine if they wanted to participate with this, in this program with us. We then had to go through a process for those that did want to participate of an allocation formula. And the allocation, as I alluded to, is based on a formula related to low-income families. How many low-income families were attending these non-public schools? And then there was an allocation formula where a piece, and the total amount for the CARES Act for Monroe-Woodbury is about $1.3 million. So it wasn't a huge amount of money. I know that seems like a lot, but the other two pieces were larger. The Carissa
Right.
and the ARPA. But again, generally, we spent this, and these other schools were spending this money on, some of the things that we've been talking about already: learning loss,
Right.
mitigation, personal protective equipment. There's a lot of PPE. There was partitions that we had to buy. We had assessments of our HVAC systems in our buildings to optimize air circulation and airflow, sort of make the buildings as healthy as possible, again, to mitigate the spread of COVID. In general, the ARPA monies, and again, Carissa and ARPA are to be spent over the course of 2 to 3 years. I mean, there may be one of those that even goes out for 4 years. The CARES money was spent really in the first year. The final piece with the ARPA funding has to do, again, Dr. Hassler alluded to the summer programs that we've conducted, the additional counseling salaries and services that we're providing to students that may have been, impacted by COVID, experiencing mental health issues brought on by the pandemic-related trauma and isolation. And finally, with the ARPA, we're also, as part of the application process, going to provide some facilities improvements to our HVAC systems and our building management systems to, again, make the buildings healthier, improve the air quality, to mitigate any sort of spread of a disease like COVID-19.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Question number 16 reads, if the governor mandates vaccine, will Monroe-Woodbury dispute it? As a member of Orange County, we have a conduit to the State Education Department and the Board of Regents. Our conduit is the District Superintendent, otherwise known as the BOCES District Superintendent. When any mandate or directive is given to school districts, our school attorneys will provide a legal update. Some mandates can be interpreted in multiple ways. Others are clear and direct. In deciding whether or not to follow a mandate or a directive, our standard protocol is to meet with our local district superintendents and get counsel from our school attorneys. Based on their guidance, we decide next steps, always with a focus on health and safety for our school and community. It's important to note that there are funding implications for school districts refusing to follow state mandate. These penalties can come in the form of fines or denials of state or federal aid that could impact our taxpayers. All these factors weigh in on deciding whether or not to dispute a state mandate. Question number 16. If quarantine guidelines change and affect in-person attendance at MW, how will we be notified? First of all, we have a reopening plan on our website. And if there are any changes, we will obviously put that change, we will amend our reopening plan. But the second way is that we will certainly update our families via email. Question number 17, what additional supports are MW currently providing related service providers, special educators, that will help them capture and address content lost during the 18 months of hybrid/remote learning?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, instruction is being differentiated to support our student needs due to the interruptions that took place during the pandemic and hybrid and remote instruction. And certainly this is the case in our special education classes. This is an area that our teachers, particularly our special educators, are skilled at, and this was true even prior to the pandemic. But this certainly continues to be the case when we return to full in-person instruction and realize the scope of what we had to do in order to be able to support our students. In terms of professional development, we have consultants that work with our special educators via instructional coaching and PD on ways to be able to support student needs. We continue to provide professional development also to our related service providers through various programs and initiatives, even things that were in place pre-pandemic on initiatives such as dialectical behavioral therapy and zones of regulation. So it's kind of a combination of ways that we provide that level of support.
Thank you. Question number 18, we received several questions regarding the mask mandate. I think the questions range from, are you required to use a specific mask? The answer to that question is no. I think that Mr. Kravatz has with him, if you can just hold it up, it's a little booklet.
A couple of booklets.
You got a couple, I believe it comes from the state.
Yep.
So I just want you to show that. So that booklet, thank you.
You're welcome.
That booklet really is our guidance. So there are certain things that we're required to do. Obviously, we're required to, all students are required to wear masks when they're indoors. There is no specific mask that we can require. I know there's some concern regarding which is the best mask to use, and I think that according to this CDC, it's just a matter of wearing a mask. Any mask some masks are better than others, but as far as wearing a mask, I think that's one of the mitigating factors. Obviously, staying as far away from one another, not coming to school when you're sick, making sure you wash your hands, the same things that we probably have heard for probably a year and a half. The mask mandates are still in effect, and I'm sure given the current situation that we're in, it's not going to go away. But we recognize that wearing a mask can be overwhelming for people and that children and adults all need a mask break, especially the teachers and the staff that are working in the building with the students and the students. So I think it's really important for us to make sure that when a student needs a mask break, they either go outside or they go to an area, take their mask off and take a deep breath, because we recognize that this has been difficult for everybody to have to wear a mask all day long, and it's really difficult for our staff that are in the building. Question number 19, there was a post on social media that MW has received $8 million in state funding for complying to the mask mandate. Is that true? And if so, can you please elaborate on what this really means and how the money is really being spent?
Okay, so I think probably what the statement or the post is referring to is the ARPA funding. And I had mentioned that earlier as one of the last pieces of federal funding to pass that was available to school districts. And I mentioned also that we'll be using that over, a 3-year period in all likelihood. So the district was allocated approximately $8.7 million in ARPA fundings, American Rescue Plan Act. That's what ARPA stands for. So this would provide funding to cover expenses associated with reversing student learning loss due to remote learning, new summer school programs, we've touched on that previously, hiring of additional staff and consultants to provide support and services to students experiencing mental health problems as a result of the pandemic. I've also mentioned that earlier. The district will continue to use COVID-19 federal funding to purchase and support technology, devices, and infrastructure. that were needed during remote learning phase of the pandemic and will be needed into the future as the district moves to a one-to-one initiative, which means we're providing a device, Dr. Vyas alluded to earlier, to every student. Not every district does that, and that's something that we have used some of this federal funding to sponsor and support. Other materials and supplies, including masks, and back to the original question, have been and will continue to be funded with federal dollars.
Now that we're talking about masks, I did receive an email from a parent who was concerned that their child went to the bus stop and they were not allowed on because they didn't have a mask. Do we still have masks available on our buses?
As far as I know, yes. yeah.
Okay. Because that's my understanding, is that we have a supply of masks. Question number 20, will the COVID vaccine be required for children to attend school possibly in the fall? That is not a decision that is made at my level. That decision is really made at the state level. Again, I sort of discussed that a little bit. If the state requires a vaccine, we then have to, as a school district, take a look at the requirement and, take the lead from our attorneys and decide whether or not that is something we should do, always knowing that if the district decides not to follow a state mandate, there are financial implications to that. So I don't know if we're going to be required in the fall. I'm not sure. That is something at the state level and or maybe even at the county level. The next set of questions has to do with what's going on in our schools. Question number 21, our experience at MW has been great. We've enjoyed each school and think the teachers do a great job. Thank you for saying that. Our kids are extremely happy. My wife and I watched the recent board meeting and became concerned about safety in the schools. Based on our conversation with our children, they feel happy and safe. Is there any more information you could provide on school safety by school, number of incidents, severity of incidents that might address the concerns raised at that meeting?
Yeah, so I can address that to some degree. So we're still analyzing and compiling data related to the number of disciplinary incidents since the start of the year. So it's a bit unclear at this point if there are, in fact, more disciplinary incidents occurring as compared to, I would say, the 2018-19 year, which was our last uninterrupted year.
Right.
However, one thing we have noticed in the data is the severity or seriousness of the incidents seems to be trending higher than in that year, the 18-19 year. Again, the last sort of normal year. Obviously, this issue requires additional analysis to fully understand what's happening. But in the meantime, we will continue to hire additional safety officers and school staff, particularly school monitors, to provide additional adult supervision and intervention resources. When there are issues, we have adults that are there to intervene before it becomes a problem, or to call for additional assistance if in fact something does happen. We'll be working with the Town of Woodbury Police Department to bring another school resource officer to the high school. So we already have one school resource officer at the high school and every one of our other 6 buildings. So we would have another officer there, bringing the total to 2 SROs at the high school on a temporary basis.
In addition to safety officers.
In addition to the full complement of safety officers and the additional school monitors we're going to be hiring and deploying at the high school, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 monitors to, again, help with supervision in the hallways. We had issues with, which I think there's some questions a little further down, with bathroom closures. Happy to report we've opened the bathrooms. But, those kinds of things that we need that additional adult supervision. So other things that are happening, related to safety and security, we intend to initiate a security assessment and review, an audit, if you will, of our safety and security program at the district-wide, but especially at the high school. I think that's where we would begin, the high school and the middle school. We'll review all our security and safety policies, procedures, protocols, with an eye towards improvement, continuous improvement. Other things, again, related to safety, security, We will be appointing a new Director of Safety and Emergency Management tomorrow night at our board meeting. And the ongoing recruitment and training for safety officers will continue to occur.
Thank you. And I believe that we are going to be appointing or approving, hopefully the board will be, I shouldn't say hopefully, the board will be approving the monitors at tomorrow night's board meeting. So those people will
that's correct.
begin, do we know when they're going to begin,
Two of them
Mr.
will start
Kravatz?
on Thursday, the 16th, and two of them are currently in other roles in the district, and they'll start on January 3rd.
And our new director will start on Monday.
Correct.
The following
December
Monday.
20th.
So we have a lot of things that are going on. And so question number 23, which is in regards to excessive fights, what are we doing? I think we answered that question. Question number 24 reads, lastly, drug use and vaping. I've heard numerous accounts from parents that their children have observed transactions are being offered drugs and other illicit substances inside of the school hallways and bathrooms in both the high school and the middle school. I've heard numerous accounts that vaping is occurring in the middle school bathrooms. It is very alarming that drugs and vaping are so easily accessible in the schools. It needs to be addressed. Before you answer, I do want to say something, is that it's unfortunate, but you can buy these vaping pens on the internet. And what students are doing is actually ordering them and having them delivered to their home. And that is a real problem, and that's something that on our end, we're going to be hoping to combat, right? We have young people who are being exposed to these things in a very easy way. And so that's a piece that's very disturbing to us as well. I'm sorry, if you can answer this question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. So the additional safety staff that we mentioned earlier, the additional monitors and the additional school resource officer at the high school will go a long way, hopefully, to curbing some of this unacceptable behavior. We will also be working with local law enforcement to assess bringing back the police canine units to the high school to identify illicit contraband and drugs, frankly, through random inspections. The district also continues to use anonymous alert software, which is a piece of software we've used for a few years now, which allows incidents and just general information to be anonymously reported to the school by students and other stakeholders.
Thank you. Question number 25 is a similar question, but I know Dr. Hassler wanted to speak a little bit about organizations that we partner with.
Sure, and in addition to not only the fights, but the drug sales and drug use and things like that in the building, obviously, there's a health and safety perspective and the increase in safety staff and supervision certainly to address it, but there's also a disciplinary and a behavioral perspective also. I know Mrs. Rodriguez is going to speak about the code of conduct. Certainly students that are caught doing this are disciplined, but we also have various interventions in place in order to be able to support students who are identified as having various substance abuse issues. We partner with Orange Ulster BOCES and we send students to the Restart program there. We partner with the Orange County Alcohol and Drug Abuse Council and access a variety of programs that their organization offers. So it's kind of a multifaceted approach that we implement on a regular basis to address those issues.
Thank you. Question number 26, when a child becomes disruptive in class and is disciplined with detention, as an example, can someone describe what happens on a second or third offense? Is this tracked? Trying to gain perspective on how teachers and administrators are dealing with children that aren't focused or having behavior issues for one reason or another. So Dr. Hassler mentioned that the district has a code of conduct. So every August, we meaning the Board of Education, they approve the code of conduct. And so in the code of conduct, in the back of the code of conduct is sort of a disciplinary page. If you do this, this will happen to you. And so the person who wrote the question really asked, so what happens to a student who's done something multiple times? Well, we call it progressive discipline. If a student does one offense, maybe he or she is late to class, then that's going to be met with one threshold. If a student is doing this chronically, then obviously the disciplinary consequence will be different, but also we would have to put other things into effect. If it was just being late to class, and I'm assuming that There would be a conversation with the student as to why they're late to class. We've had situations like that. As a matter of fact, we just spoke about this yesterday regarding a student who was late to class. There was a medical condition. The administrator called the parent. The parent then gave us the documentation that went to our nurse, and then we provided that information to our staff so that they would understand that the student was late to class because they had some mitigating situations. So there's multiple, there is progressive discipline, there is a code of conduct. I had mentioned this at the last Board of Education. School building principals can only suspend students for 5 days. If the incident is so egregious and dangerous, a school principal has an option of sending them to my office. So it's either a superintendent review or a superintendent hearing. Both have the opportunity or the ability to suspend students for an extended period of time. When that happens, for example, if it's a student, if it's a superintendent review, they meet with me. And so first thing I do is I talk about the code of conduct. I look at what we called, and I mentioned this at the last board meeting, their anecdotal record. So a question is, how do you chart? So in Power School, there's a disciplinary icon. So a student's disciplinary record, or I refer to as an anecdotal record, is provided to the superintendent or to the hearing officer who's going to make a determination as to what is the next step for the district. I can assure you that students who have egregious behavior can be suspended from 3 months, 6 months, up to a school year. Again, always with a focus on making sure that our students are safe. But we do believe that students have to have consequences for their actions, as well as looking at the root of those issues. So we look at this from both a consequence and why the student is doing what they're doing. But the school district has suspended students for an extended period of time, and the other thing is that we have expelled students. And I said this at the last board meeting, it is something that I do not want to do, but if I feel a student's behavior is so dangerous and so egregious, and we have done everything we can to support them, unfortunately, I have expelled 2 students from the district. And again, it's not something that I'm proud of, but sometimes we need to send a message. And if students are watching this right now, I really implore you to understand that you deserve to be in a school that's safe, where you feel that you can learn. And so it's really important that when we address discipline, it's really everyone is responsible for making sure that students behave appropriately. And so the next question is, have you thought about doing an assembly? And so I met with the administrative team, and yes, many of our administrators plan on meeting. Some have already, but there is going to be a plan when we return back to school, especially at the secondary, to meet with our students, tell them what our expectations are, hold them accountable, and I believe that our students can rise to that occasion. Let's go. I apologize, I closed my book, so let me make sure. One more question, 27, are there any mandatory punishments for kids who are assaulted? So if students are involved in an assault, the other thing that we do is we do contact the local police. There is a blotter that's taken, and students who have assaulted another student can be arrested, depending on the age, can be expelled from the district, and can be suspended. Question number 30, why are these threats non-credible, yet there is a need for more police? I'm sure that seems like a double message here, right? So first of all, I want the community to know that when we know of a threat, and a threat can be in multiple ways. It can be a phone call, it can be a social media post, it can be something that's written somewhere, it can be an email. The first thing that we do is we collaborate with our local police, and the Woodbury police have been instrumental in helping us make those decisions. We take a look at the threat, we look at its credibility. So I know that 2 weeks ago we had a social media post, and people were wondering, well, why did we say that was, when I say we, I say the police, not credible? It was an old post. It was a post that was circulating not only in Monroe-Woodbury, but everywhere. It was not specific to Monroe-Woodbury. So those are the factors that are taken into consideration when the police, the local police, and sometimes the state police, and in some cases even the FBI get involved in determining whether a post is not credible. However, we also know that our students feel a certain, they're anxious, right? So in order to address that, our students being anxious, we provide additional police. And so that's what we did in this incident that happened about a week ago. It is not that we're saying that we don't believe that it's not credible, but we also want to make sure that our students and our families, our parents who are at home, feel comfortable. And again, this particular post had an origin out of the state of New York, so that's why it was deemed not credible. Questions number 31 and 32 are similar questions regarding violence in our school. Question number 33 has to do with what are we doing about safety. I think Mr. Cahill talked about that. Dr. Hassler also mentioned some of the other things that we're doing, some of the organizations that we're partnering with. Question number 34. There has been a sharp divide amongst parents regarding CRT being taught in Monroe-Woodbury Central School District. This appears to be miscommunication and/or a lack of understanding between the message the BOE is relaying in its meetings and what is actually being taught in schools. I personally have done my own research and know that the school is being more culturally inclusive and implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion. The acronym is DEI, into the curriculum. As a parent and a person of color, I applaud the district's effort and see this addition to the curriculum as a positive. Can you please distribute information to parents to explain how this is being implemented in the curriculum and the difference between CRT and DEI, or a short segment at this town hall would suffice? Dr. Hassler?
And I think also question 35, it says, I'd like to know the district's position on incorporating critical race
Yep.
theory or any other elements of diversity. So the two very similar questions. Also at the August 25th Board of Education meeting, aside from doing the presentation about the reopening from school, Mrs. Rodriguez and I responded to a variety of questions from parents and community members regarding critical race theory. One of the things that we shared at that Board of Education meeting was that CRT is not a curriculum that is being taught. We shared things with the community about how the district is implementing the state education department's culturally responsive framework that was released 2 years ago. That document specifically outlines 4 key areas of what school districts should be doing for creating welcoming and affirming environments, establishing high expectations on rigorous instruction, developing inclusive curriculum and assessments, promoting ongoing professional development and learning support. So certainly, obviously not to occupy all of the time of this meeting on that issue, I encourage people to go back and view that August 25th Board of Education meeting where we speak a lot about those various elements.
Thank you, Dr. Hassler. Can you please, question number 35 was the same, so
Yep.
question number 36, can you please provide information on how a course curriculum program literature is vetted, created, approved, implemented for our children? Please discuss the administration and/or school board and teachers' role in their ability to use autonomy as well as to modify, decline, rescind options or recommendations.
Sure. This was also an area that was spoken about during that presentation at the August 25th Board of Education meeting. In summary, basically, we follow the New York State Ed learning standards for each course or content area and make sure that the standards are linked directly to our curriculum, largely because the vast majority of the classes that we teach culminate in some form of standardized assessment. If there's no standardized assessment for other areas like music, visual arts, facts, family and consumer science, physical education, we still follow the learning standards for those, even though that there isn't a standardized assessment at the end of the school year. As the state comes out with new standards, we obviously make adjustments in our curriculum to make sure that we continue to follow those modifications. For example, the State Ed Department released the New York State Social Studies the new New York State Social Studies framework in 2016, We had to realign our curriculum to make sure that our content is culminating in what is expected of students on Regents exams. This June is going to be the first administration of the U.S. History, the updated U.S. History Regents exam. Another question was regarding textbook selection and program selection within the school district. The vast majority of the programs and textbooks that are selected within the school district are developed and formed based upon committee recommendation. The committees they consist of teachers and administrators in the school district. They identify the need for a new textbook or a new program. The committee meets, they review the various options that are out there in terms of textbooks and programs that would suit our needs. They review each of those programs. In some cases, they conduct pilots. For example, right now, we're in the middle of reviewing math programs at the elementary level. We're conducting pilots across the K-5 level. At the end of that session, we meet with our teachers and our administrators to determine which of those would best serve the needs of the school district. Ultimately, we take that recommendation. It comes to myself and it comes to the superintendent. We make a recommendation to the Board of Education ultimately for their approval. Once again, if you go back to that Board of Education meeting on August 25th, we really go into a lot of these issues in greater detail.
Thank you.
Yep.
Question number 37. Why are progress reports, report cards issued after parent-teacher conferences? Can we reconsider issuing them before so that specific questions can be addressed at these conferences?
Sure. This is a little bit challenging because in the fall, as the parents in the school district know, we have 3 sessions of parent-teacher conferences at each of the grade level bands within the school district. We have 1 half-day conference that's scheduled for all kindergarten through 12th grade students during the day. And then we have 2 evening sessions for the K-1 level, the 2-5 level, the middle level, and then the high school level. The challenge is that that involves multiple dates because in addition to the scheduling of parent-teacher conferences, we try hard to make sure that we don't overlap with other events that are scheduled in the school district, like concerts or other evening events that are happening across the school district. The challenge, I'm assuming that this question is related to at the elementary level, is the challenge is that the elementary trimester usually ends around the first week of December. It takes us about a week to complete the report cards and have the report cards sent home. I know that I got my 2 elementary students' report cards last Friday. Making sure that we have enough days to be able to schedule all of those parent-teacher conferences after report cards go home is very, very difficult. There's just not enough time in order to be able to get those scheduled. Sometimes we have the ability to be able to get them after, but there's always usually a few that end up having to take place beforehand. But certainly that feedback is something that we consider and will continue to consider when we develop the district calendar.
Thank you. Questions number 38 through 41 all have to do with the bathrooms at the high school, and I believe that some of those questions were answered. One of the questions is, when are we going to open all the bathrooms? I believe, Mr. Cahill, you said all the bathrooms are right now, they're open.
Yes.
There was another question regarding why were gender-neutral bathrooms changed to teacher-only bathrooms? I think that's not the case. Did you want to speak to that, Mr. Cahill?
Sure. I think there was an issue with some of the bathrooms on the lower level of the high school being used for, vaping or other sort of misbehaviors. So I think there was a period of time where some of those were closed and/or changed to teacher-only bathrooms. But I think, subsequent to, some of these issues, we've opened all the bathrooms, and that, the lower level bathrooms would resume the normal gender-neutral assignment and not be not be locked and/or reassigned to teachers only.
Right. I did have an opportunity to speak to the high school administration yesterday and ask that question, and they said, in fact, it's the opposite, right? Gender-neutral bathrooms, teachers' bathrooms have actually been changed into gender-neutral bathrooms. So those are those questions. The question number 42, this parent really was talking about the decision of the district to not have Friday night games. And the person goes on to talk about they felt that we were penalizing the students who were behaving well. That was a very difficult decision to make, and it was with when we shared that information, it was with a heavy heart. I've been in the district for 20 years, and I never thought that that would be happening here in our district, that we would have, it was very chaotic. We had, and I mentioned this before, we had a parent who was upset with one of our administrators and struck them. That was a very difficult moment, and you might call it a defining moment, right? So the decision to not have those games played on Friday night was really purely based on our ability to manage what was going on, our discussion with the local police and the state police. We met with them. That was a very, very difficult decision to make, but ultimately, I wanted to also send the message that we as a district have always been able to have Friday night football, right? We have a beautiful turf field, and so it's really important that as we move into the next school year, we'll take a look at that. We just want to make sure our students are safe, and we want our students to enjoy that. It's a beautiful thing to sit in that, to be in the audience and watch the game with the lights on. It is a great, great feeling. But at the same time, while that was going on, we had students who were misbehaving and adults who were misbehaving, and they were disrespecting our local police, and that is simply not acceptable. The police are here to take care of and make sure that we're safe. Our students and our parents and our families cannot disrespect the police, and when that happens and disrespect our administrators and the employees of this district, then we had to make a very difficult decision. I hope that come the next opportunity that we won't have to do that, but I've unfortunately had to make some difficult decisions based on the behavior of, it was a large group of people. But again, I hope that we get through this year and that come September, come football season, that we are able to do that and that we're able to go back to Friday Night Lights, because it is hometown, it's Monroe-Woodbury, and what makes us very unique. Okay, we have approximately 4 minutes. So we have one question, and it is a question that, I don't know, it's, can you please shed light on the potential out-of-district students from Fort Montgomery? Do you want to briefly talk about that? Like, briefly, like
Yes,
2 minutes?
2 minutes, okay. So, yes, so where do we begin? So West Point educates the elementary level and middle school students on the post, right, at West Point. There's an elementary school and a middle school. For the high school students that reside in West Point, those students are tuitioned to O'Neill High School, local high school. This is all controlled and managed through the Department of Defense Education Activity. So that is the unit in the Department of Defense that actually literally educates tens of thousands of students all over the world and the nation. And so DODEA, that is the name of this unit, issued a solicitation, which is like a request for proposal. And basically what they put out to school districts in Orange County was this solicitation, which basically asked them to submit a proposal to educate these students from West Point in their local high school. And these students would be tuitioned into Monroe-Woodbury High School. That's what the question is referring to. We would be paid a fee by the federal government, Department of Defense. And, when we analyze the situation, we feel that our high school is obviously a great high school with a huge number of programs based on the size and the makeup of the district, that it would be both beneficial for Monroe-Woodbury and I think the students involved to have the exposure to the kind of comprehensive offerings that we have at the high school. So I think that's what this is referring to,
And right, so we've put in, the district has put in, I mean, there's another proposal, they went out for another proposal. We are planning on putting in another proposal. We are not the only school district that is doing that, but we wanted to let the community know. I know there was some concern, but we also have a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility when an opportunity arises for us as a school district to do that, not to hurt anyone else, but we make those decisions. We are down to 1 minute. I want to say thank you to the assistant superintendents for this virtual town hall. If I wasn't able to answer your question, please email us and let us know. I thank you again to those who spent the hour with us. We are working to make sure that we inform you and keep you informed as to what's going on and to be as transparent as possible. I appreciate this, and if I don't get this opportunity again, have a wonderful winter break, and thank you again.